Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to slow things down a bit and take a really deliberate look at something that's probably sitting in your pantry right now. We're exploring the complex double life of chocolate. It's a story of incredible chemistry and rich cultural heritage, but it's also a story shadowed by a deeply unsettling reality. So let's unpack it together, step by step. So how exactly did a bitter, sacred brew become a total global obsession? And, maybe more importantly, what is the hidden human cost behind it? We usually just grab a chocolate bar without a second thought, right? But the journey of this little bean across centuries and continents is profound, and the price paid for our sweet treats goes far, far beyond what is printed on a receipt.
Part 1. The Sacred Mesoamerican Brew. The Ancient Roots of Chocolate.
Okay, let's dive into this. Way back around 1900 BCE, folks in Mesoamerica, like the Mayans and Aztecs, completely revered the native cacao tree. But here's the thing, they weren't eating solid chocolate bars. They actually drank it as this cold, unsweetened, incredibly bitter beverage called sokowao. Considered a sacred medicine and a mediator of spiritual energy, they ground the cacao and spiced it with vibrant ingredients like chili pepper, vanilla, and a plant known as ear flower, which actually brought a distinct taste of white pepper to the brew.
And getting this drink ready was a whole ritual in itself. To get this really rich, emulsified texture, the Maya would pour the liquid from a height, just back and forth between vessels. They did this slowly, carefully whipping up a thick brown foam. And that foam was actually the ultimate marker of quality. The darkness of the bubbles and the complexity of the aroma told them absolutely everything they needed to know about the beans.
Part 2. The Industrial Chocolate Revolution. From bitter medicine to sweet luxury.
Let's move forward and see how this builds, because it's wild how a bitter, spicy beverage turned into a sweet global commodity. Basically, European colonizers brought the bean back and, over centuries, adapted it for their own sugar-craving palates. There were three massive mechanical leaps here. In 1828, a Dutch chemist named Conrad van Houten invented a hydraulic press that separated cocoa butter, leaving a fine powder. Then, in 1879, Rudolf Lindt famously left a mixing machine on over the weekend by total accident, inventing conching, which is what gave chocolate its silky, melting texture. Finally, in 1900, Milton Hershey introduced mass-market milk chocolate, making it cheap and accessible to the general public.
Part 3. The Mechanics of Chocolate. The Physical Journey from Bean to Bar. Now, even with all that industrial innovation, actually getting from a pod hanging on a tree to a finished chocolate bar requires incredibly labor-intensive, delicate work. First, farmers carefully cut the pods by hand. You have to be gentle so you don't damage the tree's bark, and then you split them open. The beans are heaped onto plantain leaves, wrapped up and left to ferment in the sweltering heat for 5 to 8 days. The fleshy pulp breaks down, catalyzing those rich flavors. Only after drying on bamboo mats do the beans finally reach a factory for roasting, grinding, and intense mixing. Then, at the very end of manufacturing, we meet the temperamental chemistry of chocolate. It goes through a process called tempering. See, if chocolate cools down way too fast, these unstable crystals form. That causes a defect known as fat bloom, where the surface looks all mottled and matte. To get that beautiful, shiny snap we expect from a fresh bar, manufacturers must meticulously raise, lower, and agitate the chocolate at highly precise temperatures to force only the stable crystals to form.
Part 4. The bitter reality of cocoa, the true cost of mass production.
So, the crucial point is this. Beneath all the cool science of tempering and the luxury of smooth chocolate lies a profound humanitarian crisis. Between the highs of past commodity booms and the eventual lows, the global market saw a devastating 71.2% drop in the real price of cocoa. Just imagine the economic ruin this creates for farmers at the very bottom of the supply chain who can't simply switch crops because cocoa trees take years to mature.
Today, West African countries like Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana account for more than half of the world's cocoa output. But the farmers there are essentially trapped. They battle continuous deforestation, depleted soils, pests, and aging tree stocks that produce fewer and fewer pods. Because world prices are so severely depressed, sharecroppers, often working under a system called abusa, where they only keep a fraction of the yield, simply cannot afford to pay adult laborers.
And sadly, this intense poverty has led to some unimaginable darkness. Investigations have repeatedly uncovered the widespread use of enslaved, unpaid labor, very often involving young migrants or children. Captives have endured brutal conditions, working from dawn until dusk. They carry impossibly heavy sacks and face severe physical abuse and psychological terror if they slow down or try to escape. It is a modern tragedy directly feeding a global luxury. When media exposure brought these horrific realities to light, it led to the 2001 Harkin-Engel Protocol. This was a landmark agreement between the chocolate industry, governments, and human rights organizations to combat slavery and illegal child labor. But as the data makes crystal clear, the battle to actually eradicate forced labor in this deeply entrenched industry is agonizingly slow. The systemic issues of extreme poverty remain largely unsolved.
Part 5. Marketing Myths and Stereotypes. The Illusion of Craft Chocolate.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how chocolate is marketed to us in the West, especially while farmers face such a brutal economic reality. We're very often sold an idealized, exoticized illusion just to justify premium prices. Craft chocolate marketing relies heavily on specific buzzwords, labeling indigenous cultures as ancient, pristine, or tribal guardians. These terms essentially commodify these cultures, marketing them to consumers as primitive stereotypes to create a mythical story of production.
But true appreciation requires acknowledging the modern reality of these communities. Indigenous farmers are not museum exhibits frozen in the past. As our sources point out, communities in places like Guatemala have been grinding cocoa for thousands of years, sure, but today they might serve that ancient beverage in a styrofoam cup right alongside a knockoff Coca-Cola. Their cultures are vibrant collages of resilience and adaptation within a modern, global capitalist system.
Part 6. The Future of Fair Trade. Creating an equitable supply chain.
And this brilliantly illustrates that while we've looked at the exploitation and the myths, there are tangible solutions proving that a more equitable supply chain is entirely possible. The Kawapa Kokuo Fair Trade Cooperative model fundamentally shifts the power dynamic. Instead of systematic cheating by underweighing beans, there is complete transparency. Farmers are paid immediately in cash. The profits are returned to the farmers to fund democratically agreed-upon community projects, promote women's participation, and provide credit unions. It returns dignity and fair compensation right back into the hands of those doing the hardest work.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this. Chocolate is a sacred chemical marvel. It's a complex treat with a history that's both beautiful and deeply troubled. As consumers, every time we break off a square, what is our responsibility to the farmers who grow it? Let that thought linger the next time you reach for a bar. Thank you so much for taking the time to slow down and learn with me today.